Welcome to the Coming to Your Senses podcast, where it's me. And I want to talk about something that, if I'm honest, it's probably going to be one of the most unsexy kind of conversations that we can have. But it's something that, if you've seen Ted Lasso, there is a scene in Ted Lasso where Dr. Sharon, the team's doctor, says to Ted, he says something along the lines of that he doesn't want to know the truth. And she says, but the truth, Ted, the truth will set you free. At first it will piss you off. And I kind of think that is the headline for this conversation, is that potentially what I'm about to share could well and truly piss you off. It's not my intention. As I often say, I can give offense, but whether you choose to take it is completely up to you. But I think it's a conversation that we need to have. And it's come to prominence again for myself through a conversation that I had with my coach last week. Not that we were talking directly about it, but the things that surfaced in that conversation has made me start to think about this. And also I recorded another podcast episode this morning with a guest, and a lot of what he was saying sparked the revelation with me thinking about this. So as I was sat here thinking about what do I want to share, what's most pertinent at the forefront of my mind that could be of value to help you come to your senses, is always, well, what's forefront of mine that's helping me come to my senses? And it's a simple word: responsibility. Now, even saying that word, my guess is that you've had some kind of reaction to it, because it seems to be a dirty word. It seems to be a word that people, they don't want to engage with it. They don't want to have it. They want to, I think we are more, the more I look into this, the more it seems to me that we are far too quick to not take responsibility and rather blame someone else. And that could be a direct person within your eye line, or that could be the government, the weather, the culture, the time that I'm in, specific generation, you name it. We have this propensity to blame. And whilst we're doing that, all we do is disempower ourselves and aren't recognizing that through that disempowering ourselves, through handing our existence, our way of being over to others, we're completely negating our part in how our lives are. Now, for someone who that is how I used to live my life. That's how I absolutely perceived the world, and nothing was my fault, but everything was also my fault because of where I grew up, how I grew up, what I had access to, what I didn't have access to. And what that did was create a very challenging place to come from, a really defensive, uncomfortable, rigid place to be coming from. And therefore, I couldn't do anything about it because it wasn't my fault. And I was trying to resolve the past and make things better. But actually, what I was doing, which I see common happen for a lot of people, which is that when we start talking about how life is now, they revert back to, well, it's because this happened, that was said, that didn't happen. I wish I'd have had that, I'd have happened instead. All of those sort of conversations. But, and don't get me wrong, life happens, and we don't have specific control over that. We can have an influence and a part in it based on where we're putting our attention. But if we want to make a difference to our lives, regardless of where we're starting at, we need to wake up and smell the hummus, that we have to take responsibility for where we're at right now. Can't do anything about my past. I can't do anything about the decisions I made at lunchtime or this morning. I can't do anything about what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. I can't do anything about those things. But what I can do is take responsibility for where I'm at right now. And a breakthrough for me with that was when I had a conversation with somebody, I don't know how many decades ago now, but it was around whether I wanted to continue. They asked me about what's the impact of blaming. What was the impact of blaming somebody else? And in that instance, I'm pretty sure I was blaming my education system that I had gone through, which actually wasn't a bad school, but still didn't really have anyone that pushed or really had the time, if I'm honest. The generation of schooling that I went through is just when the national curriculum came in. So I think I missed out on those teachers being passionate and being able to teach in a way that lit them up, and suddenly they had to conform to something else. And they were trying to navigate that. So we were a very young school. I think the school was about 10 years old when I joined it. And I spent so much, probably from my 20s onwards, blaming most of how my life was on that system. And if I'd have had better teachers, if I'd have had access to different resources, all sorts of things. And I was in a conversation with someone and they said, well, how's that working out for you? What impact is maintaining that story and that blame having on you and your everyday life? And I never thought about it like that, because it was easier just to moan about it. It was easier. It's kind of like it became for me anyway, an addiction where I could keep telling this story, by keep berating, by keep moaning. I didn't have to do anything about the circumstances I was in right now. So that's where it becomes disempowering. And that's where I wasn't taking responsibility. So it was a harsh reality, an uncomfortable reality. At first, it will piss you off. But actually, what it then started me seeing was, okay, well, if I take responsibility, then I can start to do something about it. Now, is my life going to massively change overnight? Probably not. But what I can do is do those little 1% or even 0.5% changes. And if I can do those sustainably, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, I cannot believe how different my life is now to how it was even 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. And I don't believe that there's anything there's obviously something unique about me, because there is no other person on the planet that is like me, just the same way there's no one on the planet like you. But what I mean is, I don't think there's anything particularly special about what I've done other than I've done it. Whereas a lot of people talk about it or moan about it, but they're not doing anything about it. And the second thing that this person said that gave me a wake-up call. It was one of those coming to your senses moments, a slap about a face of going, oh yeah. And they simply said, do you realize the word responsibility is two words that have been put together? Response, ability. We have the ability to respond to a situation. If we don't, then we're just reacting, and a reaction is something that's happening automatically. Whereas when we're responding, there's an opportunity to choose. There's an opportunity to make decisions in that moment based on where you're at, what your thinking is. But if I can take responsibility for that, then I can do something about it. So the question that started to permeate my everyday was, okay, I'm here. So what can I do from this place? I'd taken some time to think about the areas of my life where I wanted to make a difference, and started to look at, well, what are the smallest changes that I can make? So, for example, I do not remember a time in my life where I didn't absolutely cane any kind of refined sugar. So the sweet shop was less than a minute walk from our house. It was known at some point, especially in my teenage years, for me to go and buy a chocolate box of Black Magic and sit and eat the whole lot on my own. I would lather toast with tons of jam or marmalade. 2 sugars in hot drinks, any opportunity to cane sugar, then I would have done. But I recognized that that wasn't having a great impact on my life and that I wanted to do something about it. So I started to look at what can I do? What are the small changes that I can make? And initially for me, it was removing soda drinks. So I used to, your lemonades, your Coca-Colas, Fanta, all of those things. I would have at least between 1 and 3 of those most days in my 20s, I would imagine. So that's where I started. It was like, well, let me reduce that down and then remove that. Then I did the same thing with sugar in hot drinks and yada, yada, yada. It was just, let me find the smallest things that I can do to be stepping away from those and not making it a big deal and not putting it into the camp of I'm never going to have that again, because then that becomes too restrictive. But if I've got a direction of travel that I want to go on, in that instance, it was about becoming even more healthy, then every choice that I make, it's my responsibility. Now, one of the conversations that I notice is happening a lot at the moment is because of the foods, I'm going to specifically talk about this one, because of the foods, and I use that term loosely, that are in the supermarket. Some research says it's like 80%. Some research recently has said 90% of the foods that are in our supermarkets, at least here in the UK, I'm pretty sure it's many countries as well, other countries, didn't exist 40 years ago. So therefore it's been constructed, it's made, it's not natural, it's not real, even if it's been labeled as being natural. And there's a conversation at the moment around, because of the addictive nature of those foods, it's not our fault. It's not our fault if we're craving them, if we have become addicted. And there's a part of me that I wholeheartedly agree with that. But the part that I get a bit twitchy about is the way that that conversation is perpetuated, is it's saying, therefore, I cannot do anything about it. And that part is just simply not true for the majority of us. Are we going to find overnight changes? No. Are we going to find it easy? Probably not. As you can go back and listen to the F is for fast food and episode on here, where I talk about my transition out of eating junk food at least twice a day. And I say at least because sometimes it was 3 or 4. But it is possible. It's 100% possible to do that. The same with alcohol, the same with changing anything else. It's just about making those slow, incremental changes that are right for you. And I'm not going to dictate what I think everyone should do, because everybody is different. But I think that the conversation where people are saying we can't do anything about it because we're addicted to it, I agree that there's an addiction there. I agree that our bodies have got cravings, and we're probably going to have to go through. I'm in a few weeks' time going to do a full-on detox of a number of different foods that I want to completely eliminate from my system. And I suspect that I'm going to get a headache. I suspect that there's going to be some level of lethargy or tiredness that will come in. But that's part of the detoxing process. And I know it's only going to be probably 24 hours, maybe 48 maximum of going through that. And I would rather go through that to be able to have the outcome that I'm looking for, rather than be hooked in from an addictive perspective. And that's taking responsibility. People who are or have been addicted to drugs or alcohol or gambling or anything like that, the responsibility is showing up to an AA meeting or NAC meeting or whatever it may be. The responsibility is going, well, what can I do? What's the smallest thing that I can do from here? Blaming yourself for past actions is simply not helpful. So let me look at where I am right now and how can I move forward from there? And it's the same thing no matter what aspect we look at in our lives. So wealth was another big one for me. I grew up in I'm going to say poor. It was tough. My mum and dad worked extremely hard. Dad went through a number of redundancies. There were points where mum was working 2 or 3 jobs. It wasn't easy at all. And so things were limited. So I had a perception around money, around wealth, and what was viable, what was not, and had this whole limiting perspective on me in relation to it. And when I took responsibility for that and started to challenge it, and one book I would highly recommend reading if you haven't, if this is an area that you would want to look at in your life, is The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. I always recommend it as a starting point for people to make a shift in how they look at money and how they interact with it. And that transformed my life because it gave me a different way of looking at things. And my finances have done nothing but go up ever since. And I don't think that it's that difficult to transform it. Now, I'm not saying that we're all going to immediately transform into millionaires overnight. But what I mean by that is taking responsibility. So one of the words I think that trip us up where this is concerned is try. So both with health and with finances, I hear this, which is, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to give whatever it is up, or I'm trying to be healthy. Well, the honesty is you're either giving the food up or you're not. You're either being healthy or you're not. You're either cutting back on that thing or you're not. There's no trying involved with it. And it's the same with money. You know, people often say, well, I'm trying to save money. Well, you're either spending it or you're saving it. Be honest with yourself, not to beat yourself up, not to give yourself a hard time, but be honest. And I think that's where, to me, the responsibility comes in, is taking that honesty. But when we're talking at it from a trying perspective, I'm trying to do things differently, or I'm trying to change. No, I'm either doing action, no matter how small that action is, or I'm not taking action. And it's not about the chastising. It's not about self-criticism, and it's certainly not about blame, because that's just not helpful. But when you can take responsibility for where you're at right now, how your life is right now, and look at so what can I do? So for me with finances, I knew that I got taught mathematics at school, but I certainly didn't get taught how to budget, how the economic system works, how to understand the fiat system, how to invest. I didn't get taught any of those. And in fact, there isn't a client in the nearly 20 years that I've been acting as a coach that I've asked this to. There isn't anyone that got taught that in the schooling system. So therefore, we have to do that for ourselves, unless you've been blessed with other people in your life that have taught you that. But we need to do it. And we live in a day and age where we can access that so easily on the internet in many, many different ways, whatever your preferred format, whether you want to pay for a course or whether you want to go on YouTube and look at what's available. And that's exactly where this conversation really, and why I wanted to capture this as a podcast today, because I had a conversation with my coach last week, I think it was, and there are a number of different things that came up in that conversation that has, as often happens, rattled my cage. So the truth will set you free, but at first it will piss you off. It's one of my favorite Ted Lasso quotes. And it's rattled my cage so much that I think the conversation was like Tuesday or Wednesday, and it's nearly a week now since I had the conversation, but it's still kind of like poking. And I'm like, this has really got me agitated. The thinking is really agitated about this conversation. What's going on? And it was last night I was thinking about it again, and it just gave me the opportunity to take a step back and go, what the thinking's doing is it's actively looking for ways. Who can I blame this on? Who can I apportion blame as? Well, it's because of the generation I grew up in, or it's because him, or because it's like it's desperately, that's the agitation that my thinking is going through, is just really frantically attempting to make itself feel better by blaming somebody else. And when I clocked that yesterday, I took a step back and went, okay, so I may not know how to do one of the things that my coach and I were talking about. I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue really where to start, or what would be the right step forward. So what can I do? And actually, in this instance, I've been playing around with AI a little bit, and specifically ChatGPT. I thought, you know what, rather than just do a normal search engine, I'm going to put a much broader question into ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask for specific teachers. I'm going to ask for, can it show me videos from those teachers? Can it point me in the right direction to be able to access these two things that I just actually don't know how to do? So put that in there as a prompt, and boom, these teachers came out, these insights came out, and I was like, yes, this is cool. This is going to make it easy because I don't know where to start, and now I've got a starting point. Now, will all of those teachers be the right teacher for me to learn from? I don't know until I start looking at them and looking at what it is that I'm looking for and seeing what they teach and what they share. But all of what was being shared was free. It's on YouTube. It's there. It's on podcasts. It's there for me to be able to access so that I've got a starting point. Now, obviously, if I want to take a much deeper dive, then maybe one of those teachers I might reach out to and take one of their courses or go and work with them one-on-one or whatever may be viable for what it is that I'm looking to do. But it gave me a starting point, and that's where, for me, I've got responsibility for my life. No one else has responsibility for my life. So what is the life that I'm looking for? I want to look at how I can create that, what's my part in it? What's my direction of travel? Even if I haven't got a long-term 10-year plan or something or goal, it's what about just today? What about today? What is it that I can do today that's going to keep taking me in the direction of travel? So whether it's health or wealth, or whether it's career or relationships or environment where you live, fitness, spirituality, personal development. There are so many different areas of your life that you can look at. But when you take responsibility for that area and start to look at, okay, what's the first smallest step that I can take? Yes, it's going to take commitment. Yes, it's going to take putting things in practice or stopping to do certain things. But it's only when you do that that life will become different. And very often it's about starting down that point of exploration to see where it leads you to, see where you are guided to next. That to me is where we're taking responsibility rather than abdicating that responsibility through the lens of blame to the world around us and pointing the finger outwards. Then we're not going to be able to do anything about it. So that's my invitation. If you're still listening, if you haven't gone, responsibility, I'm switching off at this conversation, is for you to start to look at what is your responsibility. And B, if you know you're somebody who gets embroiled in control and likes to be in control, and maybe you're a control addict, that control addiction, because you might end up looking to take responsibility for things that actually aren't your responsibility. And that's the other thing that we need to be careful of. Many people I notice will take responsibility for family and friends. Now, obviously, a young child, you do have responsibility to take care of them, keep them safe, keep them well, keep them healthy as best as you can. But I think as the child gets older, and something that I notice happens a lot is that people start taking on responsibility for others rather than recognizing we all have responsibility for our own lives. And that was a real sharp wake-up call for me when I was a step parent. And my eldest stepson at that point, I think he was somewhere between 15 and 17, so I'll say 16. And I remember thinking and having a conversation with somebody about it's my responsibility to make sure he's on the right path and he's taking the steps in the right way, etc., and to do everything I can as a step parent and blah, blah, blah. And this person that I was having a conversation with just basically went, wow, how heavy is all of that you're carrying? What happens if you let him be there as a guide, but it's not his life is now his responsibility. He's at that age where he can make choices. And those choices may be great ones, and those choices may not be great ones, but they're his choices. And when he takes ownership for that, only he's then going to be able to decide moving forward which path to continue making those choices. But if I, as a step parent, am trying to make those choices for him, then I'm disempowering him and me, and the relationship's not going to be great. So it was a stark wake up call of realizing that I don't have responsibility for anyone else other than myself. Be a guide, be a resource for them to go to and have a conversation with, but the choices they make are theirs. It's down to them, and all we can do is look at how we can support them. But their responsibilities are their choices, and your responsibilities are your choices. So start to look at how you can actually take responsibility for your life. Because one of the things that I notice as well is that very, very often those people that are taking responsibility for everyone else are actually not taking responsibility for themselves. They're caught up in blame because they're taking responsibility for other people. Rather than dropping that, that's when you'll have the energy to decide for yourself. So I get that it's not a sexy word. I get that it's something that very often people perceive responsibility as weighty, as heavy. They put a gotta get it right process around it, rather than realizing that it's simply about you recognizing you are where you are right now from the choices that you made consciously or not consciously in the past. But you can only make a difference to your life from this point. So what are the choices? Take responsibility for whatever choices you make right now, moving forward, that can be helpful for you and the taking your life in the direction of travel that you want to take it. Do let me know in the comments how you get on. Not intentionally looking to piss you off, but I realized that I may well have done, or rather this conversation may have triggered niggling at you those little things of going, yeah, I know, I don't want to do those things, but if I want to make change, then I need to. Please remember to like, subscribe, and also share with those others ways that they can come to their senses in the simplest, but not necessarily the easiest of ways. In this instance, by taking responsibility. And I look forward to speaking with you again on another episode very soon.